ask a question, just unmute yourself, okay?
Okay.
All right, so you should have received a photograph email like this, and I'll hold this up close if you want to take a screenshot of it, of a snow scene. Okay. And there's some advantage. There's a couple nice things about doing snow scenes. One is that snow, because it's very light on the ground, it creates real strong value contrast. And that's a strong value contrast, meaning real light lights and dark darks, can create a very powerful painting, because value contrast, the stronger the value contrast, the more that it'll attract the viewer's eye. So right off the bat, snow gives us a lot of opportunity for that real strong shift in values. Another thing about snow is that we tend to try to find the answer to paint snow in the wrong places. And if you, I stay away from information like, here's how you paint snow, and you use a toothbrush and you use some white paint and you sprinkle it over the paper and spray it around. That might give you some dots on the paper, but that really it's not really what makes it look like snow. Snow is you have to, and like so many things, we tend to look at the wrong place for these answers. And if you step back and take a look at the big idea, you're going to really find your answer how you paint snow. And that is that snow is highly reflective, more reflective than the ground plane. So that means it's going to be probably the value of the sky, or a little bit lighter than the sky, or slightly darker, but there's going to be a strong value contrast between your grass and trees and the snow. So I'm going to show you just a couple of paintings that I've been working on. And these I've been pushing more towards the abstract end of painting, to where I'm more concerned about the abstract pattern. And I want the viewer to enjoy the abstract pattern, and then to realize that there's a snow scene. So this is the one that we're going to paint today.
Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah, and it was a very fast painting. It's a full sheet, all done with a big brush, and I just jumped into it and got out of it as soon as I could. And I'm enjoying that process. So last week I was out in New York, 2 weeks ago in New York, judging the show, and had a chance to visit the museums, and I can get energized. If when you go to museums, you can just pick up one idea, it can be very, very helpful. And in my case, one new idea that I can work on that for 6 months or a year. And in the Museum of Modern Art, I saw some more abstracted paintings of some representational subject that inspired me to try this. And so this is one. Here's another scene.
That's really beautiful.
Here's another scene with the snow patterns in it. And these ideas were picked up in Spokane. And then here's one that I did yesterday. I'm really having a lot of fun with this. So here's yesterday's snow scene. So very fast, I jump in, get it, and then my big challenge is to walk away as soon as I don't really know what to do, and to not sit there and fiddle. And I think that that's a challenge for all of us. We want to just kind of touch it up at the end, and I really try to avoid that. I try to do that another day. So that's what I've been working on, and that's what I want to share with you this morning, how I do that. And once again, this is the painting that we're going to work on this morning. Okay, so first thing, for those of you who are new, I'm going to do a value study. And value studies I did in art school. I've done since then, and I've never gotten away from them. They are so helpful. And a lot of times my students really don't want to do them because they feel that it'll show their weakness in drawing. It's not, don't worry about that. Mine are very, very loose. I mean, here's one right here. I mean, this is an extremely loose one, but it gives me enough information to get me started on the painting. In fact, that's one of the value study of one of the previous paintings I just showed you. So don't worry about it being tight and perfect. I know that when you look in books and so on, you'll see these value studies and they're very, very refined, but they don't have to be. They can be if you want it to be. But right off the bat, I've determined where my horizon line is. See, so it's very helpful, but also it helps me to get started in the creative energy. I think what it does is it tends to shift me over to the right side of my brain, the creative side, and I start looking at patterns. It's probably one of the most difficult ways to do a painting is to just jump right in on the white paper of your painting. That's difficult. But if you can get some ideas going on this value study, it's very helpful. And just get used to doing them. Don't worry about how they look. They're only meant for you and for you to read. All right, now we have a pattern of grass down in here that really kind of excited me. And right now I'm also saying, let's get possibly this tree up a little bit higher. And I'm also going to try to determine, what value do I want the ground compared to the sky? In this photo, it shows that the sky is slightly darker, a little heavier cloud cover, and that's what I did on the one previously. So maybe we will make that just a little bit darker, but it's going to be fairly close in value. I'll have to use some perspective to make things lie flat, because when the ground plane is about the same value as the sky, the painting can start to look shallow and not have a sense of depth, and things tend to float around and they're not anchored. So I generally try to make a value shift, but with snow, it's so close to the same value as the sky. That's not sometimes quite as easy to do, I guess. All right, for those of you who have not been with us, I want to just share a little bit about the setup. I have my paper is at an angle. I know it doesn't look like it on the computer screen, but it's on an angle. What kind of an angle? Well, it's about the same angle as if you put a bread pan behind it. And that is very important because it allows the paint to run down. So if you don't have a bread pan right in front of you, you can just grab a book, anything that'll lift it up. It's that paint running down on its own that makes it granulate and create some scintillating colors on its own, so you don't have to force it with your brush. The same thing with my palette. My palette is actually got a bread pan underneath it on the back side, so it's at an angle. And that way the palette will self-clean, and I'm not stuck over here cleaning this out while I got something very important to do up in here. So paper's at an angle, palette's at an angle, and then the third thing that's very important on the mechanics of producing a good painting is to use moist pigment. Now, I'm not talking about hardened, sticky, gooey pigment that's been squirted with water. I'm talking about the equivalent of freshly squeezed pigment out of the tube, because I will dip my brush into the center of that pigment, and the paper and the paint will then, of course, adhere to the brush, but then I might go over to another pigment, and stack it on top. If the paint is sticky, gooey, hard, or just wet on the surface, this cannot be achieved. In order for me to get the rich darks that you see in my paintings, I have to have a fresh pigment. Now, in our moist environment, I can sometimes make that last for several days. And I also buy pigment that tends to stay moist longer. There's some that are advertised that way, such as the Sennelier brand that you can see on my website. they have a vehicle, their vehicle is honey, and that honey supposedly keeps the paint moist longer, and that helps out. So those three things right off the bat, the paper's at an angle, the palette's at an angle, and then I use fresh paint, is very, very helpful to achieving the results that I get in my paintings. The last thing is to have a good brush that's going to hold a lot of water and a lot of pigment. And that has been mentioned earlier, that they are expensive. Yes, it's animal hair. They do hold a lot of water, a lot of pigment, but it allows me to make big sweeping strokes without having to come back into the palette to pick up more paint. So you want to get your tools working for you as best you can, because you want to be focused up here and not fighting your tools. I also want to mention that for those of you who are new, that a lot of this information is going to sound new, maybe a little bit overwhelming, maybe more than you can absorb right now. Don't worry about that. Hopefully you'll come back and you'll see that there's a lot of repetition and it starts to stick after a while. But if you don't get it all, don't worry about it. Okay. I remember back in art school in Chicago that I would not grasp something that was repeated until I was actually ready for it. And I experienced a painting process that then related to what he was saying. And then I go, okay, now I get what he's saying. So repetition, there's just simply a lot of it. Okay, so now I'm going to draw on my watercolor paper. And the pencil that I used up here is a clutch pencil. It's a big, thick Nero lead. You can use graphite, but I like a Nero lead. It's black and a little bit waxy, so it doesn't shine. And normally I will draw my watercolor paper with an HB pencil, just like your #2 pencil, household pencil, but you can't see it. So I'm going to use the same Nero lead for this. And let's get this over all the way.
Eric, when you have a chance,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I see the background line of trees. And so horizontals are the darkest value at times? Or is that?
Well, the background of trees, but they're verticals, they're going up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So verticals tend, verticals tend to be the darkest. Yeah.
Right, verticals are darkest, right?
Yeah.
So are you tending that way in this picture?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's right up here in this value study. I've established that right off of the beginning.
Yeah.
Where my darkest pattern is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Generally, but yeah, that's good. Generally, but not always. But generally, if the sun's just kind of overhead, yes, then your verticals will be the darkest. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my horizon line. And I don't tend to put a whole lot of time in on my drawing. I do more drawing with the brush, but you have to do what's most comfortable for you. I'm going to use my fingers, and of course, over time, you'll be drawing less and less and more with the pencil, and more with your brush. Okay. This is probably the only time that I ever use a ruler, is that I do know that I tend to paint going downhill towards my right. And it's just the way I see things. So I'll sometimes measure just to make sure that I'm really pretty close to being straight across. Yep. Of course, it doesn't have to be accurate, but I like to see what is accurate so I can adjust. So I hit it that time. So maybe I'm getting a little better on that. All right, so I'm going to put my horizon in. Whether or not I put these houses in, well, we might try to put them in, but in my last painting, I was intending to put them in and they just didn't get in. And I thought, well, I think I like it without them. So, okay, so then we got a tree here. We got another tree here, a little bit of a dark pattern right in here. And then this, when it comes to the pattern down here for the grass, I'm just going to have to kind of do it as I paint it and feel the shapes. I want them to be interlocking. We're going to bring this up a little bit higher right here.
Oh, there it is.
All right. I want the pattern down here to be interesting. I want to stay away from shapes that are like squares, rectangles, circles, those kind of things. So right now I moved my dark spot here underneath the trees from here up to here. I felt it was coming down a little bit too far. And I just left this line here. Okay, so let's do this. I will give you 15 minutes to get set up. If you need to get something underneath your palette and underneath your paper. Also, do a value study, get your drawing here kind of loosely drawn in, and we will meet back here, or we will continue at 1/4 the hour. Now, I've also got my camera out a little further than I normally have, and I think this is working pretty good. I don't think my head is showing up quite so much in the screen. So I think I found the sweet spot for the camera this morning. If it does become a problem, you're seeing too much of my head, let me know and I'll move the camera out a little further.
No,
All right,
it's really
so I am,
good. I can see
pardon
your,
me?
this is Sally. I love it when I can see your palette, which I can
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, that was a comment in the survey that we had. Yeah, I'm glad you guys mentioned that. So I will let you guys get set up, get this drawn, and once you get this drawn, you might go back to your value study, and we'll continue at 1/4 and I've got my AirPods in, so I can answer any question at any time. That's what I'm here for. So I am available. So have at it. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes. And while we're doing that, I'm going to be waiting. I'm going to be squeezing out some more fresh pigment.
Okay, what colors?
I've got my full palette available, but I'll probably be using 3 or 4 of them. If you want to save on pigment and you're concerned about squeezing out fresh pigment, then I would just limit yourself to 3 or 4. And the ones that I kind of limited myself to on these previous paintings was ultramarine blue, permanent lizard crimson or crimson lake, cad yellow light, just those 3 colors.
Oh. Primary colors.
Just primary colors will do, yeah. But I still like to have all of them available, and just in case I switch my thinking and it's right there available. Okay. I was hearing some background radio music there or something, so I muted everybody. So let's get started here. All right, so in a painting, you can start anywhere, and I suggest that you pick the easiest, biggest, simplest shape that's clearest in your mind. So most of the time, that's some big passage of the painting that seems to be quite easy. You can see, I know what I want to do there. Sometimes I will even start with the detail. I just know what I want to do in a certain spot. Like I might do this grass down here, and that's clearest in my mind. So start with that. But most of the time, it's something big, something easy. Now that might go against what you've already been told about. Always start with your sky. Always start with this, typically the sky you might read in books, especially older books, and then work your way towards the darker values. That's a traditional way, and that does work, but it's not the only way. And I can find that that's inhibiting, because if I don't know what I want to do with the sky, why should I put that in first? And then that's going to dictate how the rest of the painting is painted. I would rather start with something that I find I want to start driving the painting with the thing that's clearest in my mind, and also the most exciting thing for me to do. So we're going to actually start on this one in the snow. We're going to put some washes of color down in the snow. Now, I did see in the chat that someone was asking if there's another substitute for a squirrel mop brush. There are some synthetics out there, and I think that some of the synthetics are getting pretty good, but I haven't found one that I have been as happy with as just a natural hair brush. You can give them a try, and I'm going to use the big one, but you could also use a smaller natural hair brush for this wash that we're going to do, but I'm going to go ahead and use this big one. Find a big brush. You could even use a flat like this. And this has got a lot of natural hairs in it. The thing is that when I come to do the grass, I'm going to splay these bristles out kind of like this. And you might think, oh, that's got to be hard on the brush. No, it really isn't. But it will allow me to do the grass and to get some of that texture. A synthetic brush is just a little bit too stiff in the bristles, and they'll come back together and form a point when I want them to stay, when I would rather that they would stay splayed out like this. That's a really nice position for the brush to get some texture. So try a bunch of them. I've just feel that the natural hair brush is the one that's going to be the best. Now you notice right off the bat, I am putting my brush in the water and I'm pushing the bristles down just gently at the bottom, and that allows the water to go into the center of the brush because I want that to be nice and moist. I want it to be responsive. If it's all dry, it won't pick up pigment and water. So now that the brush is charged with water through it, I can start with my big wash here. If you are using a synthetic brush, you might want to put some water over the top of this to help it flow. Since I've got a brush that holds a lot of water and a lot of pigment, I can just probably do it and get these washes to flow together without having to pre-wet it. So maybe I'll use it. Now I'm going to drop in a little bit more cobalt blue. You can pick, I'm going to stay on the cool side, a little bit of red. I've got 3 colors I'm going to mainly use, a red, my yellow, and my blue. But it's really, the answer to this painting is not what colors you choose, it's just getting the right values. So you can see with this big brush, I can make some big strokes. And I'm going to tone this paper, meaning just get some washes going across. And this time I'm going to actually leave some of these white spots in the paper that looks like some of the undulation of a snow bank or of a snow foreground. And notice I keep bringing color. I keep bringing color into this mixture that I have on the palette. In other words, I don't mix a color right here and then keep using that. I will bring color in, mix into that like this. And then I'll rinse out my brush, but rather going in for more color right here, I pull in fresh color and mix it again. Keep bringing in that fresh color and don't over mix. Oh, there's a little bit of red there. And you know what you do when you got a little bit of red? You don't panic. You just leave it alone. You just say, oh, I think that was probably intended to be that way, so we're just going to leave it. It's very important to me that I don't get bogged down in non-essentials. And that non-essential is going to be that little bit of red there. That'll
Eric,
probably
sorry.
create some excitement. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Polly. I was just wondering, what are you looking at? Are you looking at your value study or are you looking at the photo?
I'm just looking at the paper. When we get further into the painting, I'm going to be looking very closely at my value study. I'm going to let that drive my painting. You've got to be careful that your photo doesn't drive you. But I might go back and forth for a little bit of information. But this is the main idea that I want. What I'm looking at right now is just this part, because I know it just needs to be a light wash. And be careful. You want to err on the side of being too light here. If you go too dark, then it's going to force you to make your other darks even darker and darker and almost colorless. So let's do that. Now I've got some, so these whites can represent the snow and some of the, you know, the higher parts of the snow that catch a little more light. But that's not what's going to make it look like snow. What's going to make it look like snow is how it relates to the sky. If it's fairly close in value to the sky, then it's probably going to be about right. Okay, now I'm going to take my ultramarine blue again, maybe a little bit of raw umber, maybe a little bit of, I don't know, I've got 5 colors here on my brush, and I'm just going to let these colors run across. And you see, because I've got 5 colors on my brush, you'll get a band of nice rich color like that. I don't mix. I just grab the colors and stack them on top. The main thing here is to get a value back here that represents these trees. So, and at this point, I'm going to push in my brush into the paper a little bit, so I have this feeling of trees back there. And that's very helpful for me if I'm using it. Having a squirrel mop is very helpful for that. And I'm not going to worry if some of that runs down into my snow. You just let it go. Don't correct. I'll start some of these trees a little bit here. Just smooth it out a little bit. I just show the roof of one house back here. That's just not that important to me. So I'm just kind of suggest it, and maybe if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'm not gonna. Yeah, you can kind of get the feeling, the roof pattern there. Notice I'm also using this big squirrel mop. I haven't switched down to something smaller. All right. So see if you can get this wash in and do it fast enough so there's not a whole lot of flowering. And if some flowering does happen, backgrounds, don't worry about it, just leave them. And then come in with this mid-tone wash up in here. We'll do the grass and other things later. So at quarter after, that gives you 20 minutes. At quarter after, we'll meet again and we will start putting this grass in, possibly the sky. And since I'm waiting 20 minutes, I'm going to put the lid back on my paint to keep it moist. Okay, let's continue. And let's just notice a couple things here on this painting before we move forward. Hopefully your painting has some washes that run down, and it's no big deal if you have some back runs. I have some that are starting to form here, but overall, hopefully there can be somewhat, there's some unity in that wash. And maybe some of you might have experienced some back runs coming down, maybe from here into this. I've got one started right there. You can see, ran down into that damp part of the paper. Also, if you didn't keep your brush wet and moving and working your way down quick enough, you might get some back runs in here because the paper's starting to dry when you come back in with a wet wash, and then it tends to wick back into that area where it's drying. So you can wet your paper first, or use the big brush that I had and work down and fairly quickly. But you notice I didn't go back up here and change things. Once I was down here, I didn't go back up here because this was damp, and it would have we would have had some back runs. Now, sometimes those back runs are quite attractive, so I wouldn't say that they're a bad thing, but if you don't want them, then you can avoid them by doing the things I just mentioned. Also, notice something else I did here. I put this background of trees in. I didn't do individual trees. I just put in the mass of the trees. And notice that I tend to make it look like trees because the outside edge. It's the outside edge that really gives the character of the object. Okay, inside it, there's really not a whole lot going on other than it's dark. Notice also that when I put this tree in and this one in, I let them just kind of run into the background. And so that's a very common technique that I use, is letting objects run into each other. Later on in the painting, we can always come back and pull them and separate them from each other. But if I can get them to run together at the beginning, it'll harmonize the painting and also create some soft edges that allow me to work that I can adjust later on. Soft edges are easy to adjust later on down the painting. So I'm going to start in with some grasses down in here, but before we do that, let's practice a little bit. If you have a piece of paper that's off to the side, maybe you might want to grab that right now. Okay. So any questions so far? Can somebody just get on to let me know that you're there, because I've got everybody muted? Just say something.
You're here.
Okay.
Hear
I
you.
think
Thanks, Eric.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, because it's so quiet on my end. Sometimes I'm wondering if I lost you. Okay. So take your brush and hit it against your sponge fairly forcefully so you can get the water out, and see if you can get the bristles to splay out like this. And then I will take these bristles and I will put them in my very damp pigment. And I do ultramarine, raw umber. You can pick any color you want. I've got 4 colors here, a little bit of red, a little bit of blue. And then I'll take the brush and I will push it into the paper, and I kind of twirl it a little bit and push up. And that's how I get that texture of the grass. And notice I even might stipple it a little bit. And my brush will end up pretty splayed out. So maybe I'll rinse out the brush, get some fresh color. But before I go into my color, I hit it against the sponge again and get those bristles to splay out. And I actually push the bristles into the sponge, twirled it a little bit to get them splayed out, about like that. And then I'll grab my color again. This time I'll have to grab some phthalo green and some brown, and I'll do the same thing. Those bristles are splayed out nice. You'll get some really nice looking textured grass shapes. That's going to be it. That's good. Yes, go ahead.
This is Suzanne, and I have a question. Yes. Are you using your round brush?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do this all if you have a flat. Listen, since you asked that, Suzanne, let me show you with a flat. You can do also something similar. But the more synthetic hairs there are in the brush, the more that brush is going to stick together and not splay out. So I'll splay out my flat, and this particular flat that's my signature brush. It does have a few synthetics in it, hairs in it, to create snaps. So you can see as I push down into it, it's not quite splaying as much. So this one, I've got most of the water out. So let's see if we can do something like that. If I push into it, it'll still do it. Yeah. Or you might even use the side of the brush like that and let it skip over the paper. But I don't find it splays out quite as far. So you can see over in here, I'm not it's a little more difficult for me to get those individual strokes of the grass, but it'll do it to some degree. That's why I like those mop hair brushes. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the pattern of the grass on here. I'll grab my big squirrel mop again. I rinse it out. So notice I rinse it out, then I dry it, take the water out of the brush, but it's this rinsing out. Once I make my strokes up here, I come back here and rinse out because the colors are already overmixed. So
Eric,
now I get
this
brush the water out. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Polly. I have a hard
Polly.
time when my mop brush is splayed out to pick up the paint. It's like I pick up too much or something. And
Yeah.
my mixing doesn't work out.
Yeah, you know what, Polly, there's some degree of picking up paint, doing a little swirl, getting it to where I want. Sometimes I might have to add a little bit of water in. There's a little bit of back and forth there. So just maybe what you're doing is you're just grabbing it and you're thinking, oh, this will work. No, there's some adjustment that's probably required. So were you saying that it doesn't pick up the pigment when you have it splayed?
It kind of gets too much. And then
Too much.
Yeah, I guess just
All right.
don't take as much.
Okay, so then what you might do if you've got too much, and let's just do that here. Let's grab a little green and some cad red here. So it's really sticky. It's just too much. Okay, I've got a big glob right there on my brush.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I see I need to move my palette closer. Sorry. Okay. I've got too much there. So what I would do is I would grab some water, run it in there a little bit, maybe even rinse it out. Get that water off the brush, come back in again until it's about right. So you may need to add a little bit of water. You may need to rinse the whole thing out until you get back to what you want. All right, because it's kind of a back and forth here thing. So don't worry about a lot of your pigment ending up down here in your water. I throw a lot of it away until I get what I want. Does that help you out, Polly?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's go ahead now and put in this grass. And I'll rinse out the brush, hit it against my sponge, and I'm going to choose colors that are fairly close to what I already have because it'll just harmonize with that, which means this cad yellow or primary yellow, whichever you have, and a little bit of red. Oops, I need more blue there. Ultramarine blue is a wonderful color. It's a beautiful color, but if you overmix it, it can turn to mud real fast or make your other colors look muddy. And I've had several students I've had to say, let's back off on that ultramarine blue, just making things too dark. Okay, so that's way too dark right there, probably. Too much pigment on my brush. So I'm going to rinse the whole thing off and just kind of start again. So it feels about right. Bristles are splayed out. Get them more splayed out now. Now, when you come back into your palette to splay out your bristles, do it in a dry spot in your palette. Because if you do it in a wet spot of your palette, you're going to be picking up the water that's in your palette. And it'll pull the bristles back together again. All right, so here we go. A little more red in there than you might think. So I just move fairly quickly, try to get an interesting pattern. And what's an interesting pattern? It's mainly an interesting pattern is that the shapes, especially these light shapes that are in between, are not all the same size. And that the positive shapes, which are the grass itself, are not all the same size too. And they're interesting puzzle pieces. That's basically it. Now this time I did not rinse out my brush because I felt that what I had in before is about right. So I'm just added into it. And notice I'm using the corner of my brush to do the grass right there. Right in there. That's just these little pieces of the brush that are sticking out. And I really like doing that because it keeps me from having to change brushes. Now we have some things that are happening up here in the corner. If you look at your photo reference, there's some grass or grass in the background here. So I'm going to use this brush again, but I'm going to use just a corner of it because it's a kind of a detailed spot there. And if the brush kind of skips and makes a stroke that I don't quite expect, which has kind of happened there, I just leave it. There, that's all you really need. And let's do this. I'm going to now make my verticals of the main trees here a little bit darker. That was just kind of the background limbs there. So I'm going to push it in. And this, I'm also going to let the brush skip. This is a really good exercise, not so much in snow. It's just how to keep your brush, a big brush like this, let it skip and get the texture you want without having to do small brushes. I'm going to just kind of lighten that one up just a little bit. I just smushed that out a little bit so it's not quite so too dark there. Okay. And I'm going to also push this up just a little bit more right in here. Oh, I know what I was going to do. Is I felt, now when I put this mass on right here, I felt it was a little bit too strong. But as I look in the computer, I think it's reading okay. But I might just take you take a fingernail or else a palette knife, something like this, and you can scrape up a few things too, give yourself some texture. So maybe I'll do that also down in here for a little bit, blades of grass. But I'll create a few little lights in there, but not many. So you can kind of see what I've got there. Okay. So notice I still haven't put in little branches with a fine brush. That's all I've done is just let that brush skip. Okay. So why don't we, on the next, let's see, a quarter till, then I will start to refine this. We'll probably put the sky in and some details. At quarter till.
Eric,
Yes.
This is Sandy.
Sandy.
I'm having trouble getting my mop into a point. So like you did, you know, in your final painting up in the horizon. And
Right here.
right, not right there, more close to where the house is in the other, yes, right there.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting about 2 or 3 points at a time. I'm twisting it. I'm wetting it and trying it again. Is there some secret I'm missing?
Well, what you might do, actually, probably this was done with the corner of the brush, okay? Even though it looks like the point, I just found
Okay.
probably one spot that was sticking out and was pretty well defined. If you look at it closely, you'll see that it's not quite as hard edged as you might first think.
Oh, I see. I see. Yes. Okay.
But if you do want to get a point with your mop, then it's a matter of getting it wet and then hitting it against the sponge and pulling it. Let's do that.
Okay.
If I want to get that point going, then I put it down on my sponge and I kind of pull it towards me and twirl it,
Okay.
and then it'll come to a point, you can see. But a lot of these are really not done with the point. I'm just, the brush might be something like that.
Yes.
When I'm working up here, like I might do this, and I have
Yes.
one corner of the brush, and I just turn it to where this part of the brush, just this one piece right here,
Okay.
and I'll paint with that.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
I can see.
yeah. Yeah, I just really try to avoid changing brushes. It's not that you can't, it's just kind of a nuisance to me. So
Yeah.
I will go as far as I can.
Okay. Thanks. That
Yeah.
helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you bet. So this water's looking pretty brown, but as I touch it against the palette, it's not that. I might even touch it against my paper here. You can't, if I put it right here against this paper, you really can't see anything right there. I just took that brown water and put it right there. So I will do that. And I'll say, it's not so dirty that it's really affecting anything. Even though it looks like it, I can still use it without exchanging it out to fresh water. All right, so at this point in time, let's go ahead and establish the sky. Of course, I can do it later, but that would then get all my planes established, my sky, my ground plane or the snow, and then my verticals. So let's go ahead and do that. And I do want to make a choice here. Do I want this to be slightly darker than the ground plane? Do I want it the same value or slightly lighter? I tend to like to, with snow still to make a difference in the value of the two planes. Otherwise, it can end up being kind of flat. So I think I would make the sky a little bit darker. Snow can go either way, darker or lighter in the sky. So I'm going to take my 3 colors again, maybe throw a little bit of cerulean blue in there. And when it feels about right, just put it down and get yourself an interesting pattern. This is not such a main part of the painting, so it's not that important that I get it, really accurate clouds. I just get something up there that's just a little bit darker than my ground. I think that's a nice pattern. Now, maybe a little bit of hard edge, and we've got a little bit of yellow kind of peeking through in a few spots. Wouldn't it be kind of fun to put a little bit of yellow, especially in this area that's kind of closer to an area of dominance? Okay, now keep in mind that, and also this painting, I've only had three colors in this painting so far. No, I can't say that. I do remember picking up a couple other ones, but primarily only 3 colors. So there's a little bit of yellow there. All right, so that's kind of neat. And now let's go ahead and find some undulations in the snow down here. I don't want to go too dark, but we could do something to bring the eye down into this area. So here's what we want to do to create a good composition. We want to catch the viewer's eye at a distance, which means we have some big, interesting shapes and good values. Then we want to carry the eye throughout the picture plane. I think we're starting to do that pretty well. And then bring it to the area of dominance and hold it there as long as possible. So we caught the viewer's eye at a distance. We've got some good shapes going here, but we need to kind of bring the eye throughout the picture plane. And we can do that with a little more blue and what we might call the shadow or the undulations of the snow. And so you can see I'm doing it down in here, more so than maybe over in here. Don't be
Excuse me,
afraid to
Eric?
put in colors you don't expect, like some yellow. Yeah, someone asked a question?
Yes, are you using more ultramarine in there or some cobalt?
I think I had a little bit of cobalt and ultramarine in here. But notice also I put in some yellow right down in there. And these colors are all reflecting. So don't be afraid to put in opposite colors. It may feel kind of funny at first because it's a yellow, but it'll help out your painting. It'll make it come alive, makes the blue come alive. So now you're getting a feeling of some of these undulations in the snow as it goes up and down. It catches some light, some spots it doesn't catch light, as much light. So maybe I'll go up in here a little bit, maybe over in there. This is a pretty key change in the value of the snow right there. It catches the eye, brings the eye down here. And now notice that I've left this part of the snow lighter in value because this is my area of dominance. I want to bring the eye up into this spot. Okay. And I've left a little bit of that white in the sky. Some of these shapes maybe are not exactly what I want sometimes. You can get the feeling on that. As I paint more and more over the years, I'm just more and more convinced just to leave them alone and keep the painting fresh. So now I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to go into my sword striper. And this one is a lot of fun. I will load up the pigment at the back end of the brush, not the tip, and then drag it through the palette and kind of force that pigment to go down to the point. If you only load it at the point, you won't get much. So I take that brush, I'll show you up close here. I take that brush, I don't really put the tip into it right here. Let's see if I can get this up close to you. But I'll take the back end of it and drag it in and pull the pigment out. That allows me to pull, then I pull the pigment towards the tip of the brush. That way I can get a loaded brush. So let's do that. And once again, I'm going to take the water out of this because I want some really fine lines. Now I've got burnt sienna, burnt umber, a little bit of red, some blue. And I just kind of twirl it around in here until I get something that I think is about what I want. And so a lot of times, and there's some yellow, a lot of times you just get a feel for what you might want. And I'm going to now put these in just a few spots here. But really be careful that you don't overdo it. Smear that one a little bit. That's probably about all I want in there. When you get that edgy feeling and you don't know quite what to do, it's probably not that you don't know what to do, it's just that you probably have done enough. Now I'm going to do some down in here. And this is my area of dominance in the painting. So let's talk about that, the area of dominance. It's where you want the eye to come, the painting to finally resolve, come to the main statement that you want, and it's a resting place. If you don't have that in your painting, the viewer's eye is going to go around and around and around, and they're going to get tired of it. And I've seen so many paintings that are kind of flashy, lots of color, kind of some tricks, and maybe some sentimental subject matter, or sentimental subject matter, things like that, tricks to catch the viewer's eye, but there's really no area of dominance. And I think that they may sell paintings, but I think in the end, viewers will not look at those paintings because they're tired. They're tired of going in circles. We need to find a spot for the viewer to land. And that's what we're doing here. Now I'm going to also put a couple strokes down in here to bring the viewer's eye down in here. But as you notice, as we get further and further away from our area of dominance, there's less and less and less of this, until we just barely have any clear out here. And put in some tree trunks back in there. Okay, so why don't we let you do that, and then a quarter after we will put in the last little bit of detail. And at this point in time in my painting, I have this mirror that I look over my shoulder at it to see if everything is working okay. And I also hold it up to the big mirrors. I've got two big mirrors off to my right. So at quarter after, we will resume. Once again, ask questions at any time. And at this point, I'll clean out my water since we have a break to do that.
Eric,
Yes,
this is Susan. I have a
Yes.
question about soft edges, as usual.
yes, yes.
It with the traditional way, if you paint the sky and then you do the horizon on a kind of damp sky, and you end up with a distant horizon with a soft edge.
Yeah,
And the way you do it, which I really like, it's pretty much a hard edge.
yeah. Well, not really though, Susan, because it's a different kind of soft edge. You see how it's a broken edge?
Okay.
You see how it's kind of broken there?
So
That's another type. Yeah, it's a type of soft edge. It's broken.
Oh, okay.
You see it right there. Yeah. A hard edge would be right here. Yeah. So that's it. So I'm kind of anticipating your question, but if it's all dry, you can still give the feeling of a soft edge by letting your brush kind of skip. This is probably the clearest example is this edge right here.
Okay,
Yeah. It doesn't have to be wet into wet. Just letting the brush skip will give that feeling too, a different kind of soft edge. Did that answer your question?
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We are at past quarter after. All right. Okay, so let's take a look here. And are we done enough or do we need to do something more? And at this point, I will take a mat and slide it in here. And I'll try to just kind of relax my eyes and see if I've got everything I want in this. And I think we're pretty close, closer than I actually thought when I first looked at this. And then as I'm looking at it through this mirror over my shoulder, and I'm just letting my eye just kind of wander around it if I just feel comfortable with it. And I think you can ask yourself those three questions. Does it catch my eye at a distance? You know, if it's standing by itself and with a series of whole other paintings around it, would this one stick out? Does my eye go throughout the picture plane? And then does it come to the area of dominance and hold it there as long as possible? And the last question, does it bring the eye to the area of dominance and hold it there as long as possible? I think we can do a little bit more to give that a little more strength, to bring the eye in a little bit stronger. That's the feeling I've got. And you can do that by more detail. You can put some birds up here. But I'm feeling that I want a little more drama to where this is a little bit lighter. This is a little bit lighter in value right here, relatively speaking. That'll give a little more emphasis to that. Well, we can't really make that lighter, but what we can do is we can make something else a little bit darker in the snow to force that to look a little lighter. So that's the feeling that I have in resolving this painting, to make it a little more dynamic. But you can solve your painting in another way to bring that eye to the area of dominance. So I'm going to just darken this a little bit, that'll make that look a little lighter, and then we'll see what we have. And we may even darken the sky over in the far right slightly so that this looks a little bit lighter. And we just have to see, we just put it down. Don't never really know until you just put it down and see what you got. And you have to have quite a bit of courage with this, because act courageous, because if you don't, you will hedge on your strokes and you'll have that tentative stroke there, and it'll show up in your painting. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll also darken maybe this piece over here. So now all of my lights are really pushing in towards this area of the snow. And now I'm going to, there's nothing wrong with a few more cloud shapes over in here, but I'm not using the cloud shapes because they're there. I'm putting them in because they're there. I'm putting them in because I want this to look lighter and make this a little bit stronger in value. So I'm using the information that I have of the subject, of the natural laws of landscape planes, and also of the sky, but I'm not using them because that's what the way a sky looks, or that's the way snow looks. I'm using them because I want to bring your eye to that area of dominance. In other words, I'm not making more clouds up here because that's what the photo reference shows. I'm making more darker clouds because I want this to appear lighter. Okay, just a little bit of a cloud shape there. And there were some strokes that I put in over here that I was going to put some tree shapes in. And I thought, you know, I don't know. I don't know if I really need to put those tree shapes in. I'll just kind of leave that for now. But in the last session, when I put them in, I thought, oh, I'm not so sure about that. I was going to come through and clean them up and pick them up. And I thought, no, I think it's just better to leave and just to move forward. I think we're just better off if we just keep going forward. And usually, most all the time, if I just keep moving forward, I'm happy that I just left it there and didn't change things. Once you come in and you start changing and correcting, it can do something to your thinking that you end up losing the big picture, and you start and your mind starts to go downhill. I should say my mind does. Okay, so I'm doing few more little pieces in here to bring, but I don't want to take away from my area of dominance. So as we move in towards the area of dominance, there should be a progression of interest. And to illustrate that, I'm going to put my mat board over the top. And you can see, let's do it this way. You can see as the painting starts to reveal itself, you have a progression of more and more interest as you get towards the area of dominance. And then you have that crescendo. There's your area of dominance, and then it backs off again. Okay. And it does the same thing from each corner. More and more and more, and then the area of dominance, that crescendo, and then it backs off. And so I will put my hand and block the view of the painting, and I will reveal the portions of the painting just like I showed you with that mat, even up here in this corner. Okay, so let's stick that back in the mat again.
So Eric, just a quick question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we didn't talk about this when we were doing our whatever we call it, the sketch.
Mm-hmm.
But is that something that might be beneficial to look at when you're doing your sketch to understand? Because you kind of go from the lower right-hand corner up, you know, with interest up to that area. You also have the horizon, but that's kind of the direction of that progression that kind of takes place. So that when I look at it, and it
From
seems
here
like
up to here.
Yeah. When I'm doing my
Yeah.
sketch, I should have that as a plan. Kind of.
Well, you know,
think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, certainly. Certainly. I've done enough paintings over the years that this is enough just to get me going. And then I kind of resolve that more towards the end. But by all means, if that's something that and I would say, if I go back 40 years ago when I was in art school, I probably did put that in my sketch. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So why don't we, now I'm going to hold that up in the mirror. And I think it did the job. I think that's pretty good. And I think it'd be best to stop. I have an inclination that I want to just soften that edge a little bit so it's not too hard going across there. But I know at this point in time that my mind suddenly starts to go into correction mode, and that's a dangerous place to be. And it's just better to leave it alone. come back another day. So I'm going to sign this. And signing your painting, I try to do it in a spot where a little more calligraphy might be nice. And I can see that down in this corner.
Hey, Eric, this is Bryn.
Yeah, Ben.
What kind of brush are you signing with?
This is a Kolinsky number, I don't know, number 7. And it was actually given to me, but with just signing, and even a pointed synthetic would be fine.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and a new Kolinsky number 12 would be fine, but I don't have a new one there, so. Okay, so why don't we come back together at quarter till and we'll see what you have. Oh, I also wanted to make one other point about snow. And if you notice, I used the traditional color of blue for the undulations of the snow, but don't be locked into just that one color. You can use all sorts of different colors. And it's more about the value shifts that make it look like snow. Irving Shapiro did a demonstration years ago in class where he did a beautiful snow bank and he had all these blue colors. So we were all painting snow banks with blue colors for the shadows. And then the next month he did something very similar, but rather than blue shadows, he used colors like olive green, some cad red and cad yellow, colors that you would think that are straight out of the Southwest for the rock formation. He put those colors into the shadows of the snow, and it still looked like snow because he got the value right. And that was a huge epiphany for me, because then I realized it's not the color, it's getting the value relationships that make it look like snow.